Hello and welcome to Nutshell Recaps. This video explains the synopsis of the movie Murder Mystery 2. Warning, there will be spoilers, so proceed with caution. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, it will really help our channel grow. The story of Nick and Audrey Spitz, who left their jobs 4 years ago to create their own business, running a private detective service, is introduced in Murder Mystery 2. After solving the case, they originally gained notoriety, but they turned out to be poor investigators. Maharaja invites them to his private island wedding, which is being held for free. They run into the colonel, who was defending the Maharaja from a bullet when he lost an arm. Louis, a new bodyguard hired by the Maharaja, works alongside the colonel despite the colonel's distaste for him. Meet Claudette, the Maharaja's former civilian fiancée, who is introduced to Audrey and Nick. They decide to be married after falling in love right away. The Spitzes are completely out of their minds in their suite at the lavish presents, fare, and attire that the hosts have offered. They both put on traditional Indian attire for the Sangeet ceremony. At the ceremony, Francisco, a former football star who was named the chairman of the Maharaja's firm, is introduced to the newlyweds. He was Claudette's ex-boyfriend as well. Audrey also had an unfortunate encounter with Countess Siku, the Maharaja's former fiancée and Claudette's former flatmate. The half-sister of the Maharaja, Sarah, is also involved in the coupling. Following a lavish dance performance, the bridegroom, Maharaja Vikram, enters on an elephant in style. The guests are shocked to see that the person the elephant had been stabbed with a knife and was actually Louis, dressed as Vic. Louis dies before revealing who the murderer was, and Nick rushes to look for Vic. He spots Vic being taken away in a boat by a man dressed in black. In the meantime, Audrey uses her smartphone to capture pictures of the physical proof. The investigators, Nick and Audrey, get to work and begin looking for information concerning the death of Louis and the capture of the Maharaja. Nick comes to the conclusion that there were two offenders because someone led Louis on the elephant inside the arena and someone else abducted Maharaja. Colonel notes that only those on the board were aware of the elephant that has the Colonel, Claudette, Siku, and her companion, Sarah, and Francisco were the only people left on Nick's list of suspects. The Spitzes decide to take up the case after this results in a brawl between Claudette and Siku. That evening, each suspect stops by Nick and Audrey's room one by one to reveal their theory regarding the identity of the conspirator. All of them quarrel as a result of their mutual accusations. Just then, the kidnappers contact Claudette, advising them not to notify the police and promising to call back at 7 a.m. During the course of the investigation, both Nick and Audrey fall asleep, and they both awaken the following morning. Colonel brings a prominent investigator who is taking on the case to Nick and Audrey, as well as the rest of the group that morning. Connor Miller, the detective who is also Audrey's hero, ultimately places the blame on the couple. Nick is prepared to leave the island, but when the colonel says that the kidnappers would only speak to the Spitzes, Nick is forced to stay. While Miller and his colleagues are attempting to track down the call, Nick begins conversing with the other party. Francisco is shocked when the kidnapper demands a $50 million ransom, and the kidnapper cuts off the phone at that point. The kidnapper phones once more to indicate the price has increased to $60 million and requests that the money be delivered to Paris. When Audrey demands confirmation that Maharaja is still alive, the pair tries to apprehend the kidnapper, but the person on the other end of the queue demands a ransom of $70 million before hanging up. As the group departs for Paris, the Spitzes assist in tracing the call. Miller gives Nick control of the gun, while Audrey is in charge of the phone that the kidnapper would use to call in the ransom money. Because she is familiar with all of Miller's guidelines for dealing with a kidnapper, Audrey wins Miller over. After arriving at the location, Nick and Audrey receive a call from the kidnapper. After some brief conversation with the couple, the Maharaja orders the kidnapper to have them load the ransom into a van. When they arrive at the van, the abductor threatens to kill the couple if they refuse to comply with his orders. The kidnappers demand money from them inside the van as they are forced inside. But Nick restrains himself to the briefcase and refuses to comply. After a struggle, Audrey kills the van's driver with an axe before shooting one of the three abductors. The couple ends up collapsing inside a restaurant while Nick battles the third kidnapper and Audrey tries to drive the van while a dead man is in the driver's seat. There, the pair discovers that Louis was killed with the cheese knife from their room and that they had fled with the money, making them the main suspects in the inquiry. Miller discovers the couple in the dining establishment and removes the ransom money. The Spitzes are informed by him that the news report was false, and he requests a meeting the following day at 7 o'clock. Miller brought so much money with him that Audrey starts to distrust him and wonders if he was the kidnapper. Miller perishes in a fiery explosion that occurs just then as he is driving his vehicle. The briefcase of cash is stolen by a motorbike. However, the motorcyclist is involved in an accident and the bag is taken by a truck driver before he can do anything else. In order to perhaps run into Inspector Delacroix, whom they last saw 4 years ago at the opera, Audrey writes down the truck's number before they depart. Delacroix assists the couple in locating the truck while they are at the opera. They take his phone, car, and urge Colonel to put a stop to the abduction until they can find the owner of the money. When the pair finally arrives, they are astounded to see Countess Siku and Amani present. Siku kills Amani after the two ladies tie the couple up and runs off with the money. Before leaving, Siku sets the home on fire, but Amani shoots her first and later passes away from the wound. As they attempt to flee the scene while still being restrained, Nick and Audrey are concerned about being held accountable for 2 other killings. Despite being able to escape, Nick and Audrey are unable to do so since the fire is growing. Nick makes several unsuccessful attempts to shoot his way out, but when Audrey's coat starts to burn, he is startled, and he grabs her before leaping out the window. By coincidence, Audrey finds herself behind the wheel of the Lamborghini once more when the two manage to flee with the bag and find a car. They convene a conference of all the suspects at a restaurant inside the Eiffel Tower and begin outlining their motivations for the kidnapping. Audrey claims that Francisco could get away with the paternity lawsuits of his 2,000 children with the money, while Sarah could be the sole heiress of the company that Maharaja owned. Nick claims that Claudette was trying to get the money because she would not get any if she married Maharaja, given the prenup she had signed. He also mentions that the colonel most likely committed this crime in order to obtain a bionic arm because he detested the way wealthy people treated him. Just then, Maharaja enters the eatery, but he is bound to a bomb. In order for the kidnappers to send down a detonator to stop the bomb from going off, he instructs Nick to place the money in the lift. Nick decides to delay because he is certain the bomb is funny with just under a minute to go. Everyone watches in shock as the timer approaches 0 and the bomb does not detonate. From the glass windows, Miller enters the restaurant. Before escaping, he grabs the money and restarts the bomb's timers. As Miller attempts to flee to the top of the Eiffel Tower, Audrey eventually grabs onto him. Delacroix's gun is taken with him as Nick attempts to follow Audrey from behind. Nick eventually engages Miller's troops on the steps to the top in battle rather than taking the lift. Audrey is able to steal the detonator from Miller and deactivate the bomb in the meanwhile. While Nick is engaged in combat with Miller's soldiers, Miller restarts the explosives. Just in time, Francisco appears to assist Nick. In the meantime, Audrey warns that if Miller tampers with the detonator, she will toss away the suitcase of cash. When Nick finally reaches the top of the Eiffel, he attempts to shoot Miller with not one, but 2 firearms, but he manages to miss. When Nick disables the detonator, the bomb finally stops detonating. Audrey is pushed over the roof by Miller, who also steals her briefcase. As Audrey hangs from the tower using a harness, Nick tackles Miller in the background. Just as Miller's chopper arrives at the top of the Eiffel, Nick is able to open the bag, causing the money within to fly out. Miller makes a call to the helicopter's pilot and orders him to kill the diner witnesses. While Nick and Miller struggle, Audrey manages to hang on to the tower. Just in time, she makes it to the top of the lift with a gun, but she also misses Miller when she tries to shoot her. Miller is pushed from the top of the Eiffel by Nick while the duo collaborates to fasten him to the harness. Miller stumbles and strikes the helicopter's fan, which causes it to crash. Audrey observes something strange about the henna on Sarah's hand as they go back to the restaurant. She says that the night of the Sangeet, when Maharaja was abducted, Sarah smeared her henna. Sarah attempts to shoot Maharaja once her true intentions are revealed, and she obtains a gun from the colonel's bodyguards. However, the colonel saves him just in time, but not before taking a shot to his lone surviving arm. The soon-to-be wedded couple decides to elope after Claudette assists in tackling Sarah. Although Nick and Audrey are eager to return home, they first decided to renew their vows at the Locks of Love Bridge. The briefcase itself costs another $3 million, but the Maharaja gives the newlyweds a briefcase filled with $10 million as a thank you gift for saving his life. As the film draws to a close, the pilot steals the couple's money and leaps off the helicopter when they board it at the Maharaja's request to take Nick and Audrey on a honeymoon in his own chopper.